It's 7:27 here in London. Let's continue today's Globalist with the newspapers. And I'm delighted to say that joining me once again is Nabila Ramdani, French-Algerian journalist and the author of Fixing France, How to Repair a Broken Republic. Welcome back, Nabila. You've been hiding writing this book, haven't you?
Yes, absolutely.
Congratulations. Tell us, when's it coming out?
It is actually coming out in the US first, at the end of September, on the 26th of September. It's published by Hachette in the US, and in the UK on the 5th of October, published by Hearst.
We'll look forward to it. It sounds like you did it, 8 months from start to finish. So welcome back to the studio. We put you to work as well. Let's have a look at the papers. What have you spotted?
I have spotted a few interesting stories that some of them you've already touched upon. And one that struck me is the climate change story. Of course, it's getting hotter all over Europe, and perhaps not so much yet in London and in the UK in general at the moment. But there is no doubt that this is a massive story because the change is one of the biggest stories of our time, and one that we shouldn't overlook. I think if we do that, it will be at our peril. And specifically, the UK has now issued a new report which suggests that this kind of extreme weather poses a risk to national security, to our food supplies, and to critical infrastructure as well. So it says that all countries effectively, but not just Britain, need to adapt to a rapidly warming world. And the report warns that the risk is actually greater than previously assessed. Now it lays out what they call responsible steps to try to minimize the economic and indeed the human costs of the heat wave and other extreme weather. And it suggests plans of actions, and this will, of course, come at a cost for the government. But this comes in the wake of the British government actually, it was warned in last March that the UK is strikingly unprepared for the impact on water, on energy and other sectors that climate change is bringing.
It is that moment, isn't it, when the effects of climate change are nudging closer and closer and closer. I mean, yesterday when we saw the temperatures, and we're seeing the temperatures in southern Europe as a jet stream is pulling incredibly hot temperatures up, and someone was saying the Sahara is now coming to Europe, and the temperatures of North Africa are now hitting the likes of Italy and Spain. So, do you think that will spur people into action? Because let's face it, when the world is faced with an enormous crisis, for example, the pandemic, people were woefully ill-prepared.
Yes. Well, you're quite right to highlight this even hotter climate than before, than at previous heat waves. I mean, in France, for example, in the early 2000s, France were hit by a massively serious heat wave. But then the heat wave was around 32 to 33 degrees Celsius. Now it's around 40 or even above. But countries like France, for example, have been able to introduce emergency plans, meaning that they have a rating for extreme weather now, and they use everything from emergency services, that is to say, fire engines, ambulances, doctors, to social services to make sure that everybody in a particular area is looked after and that they have adequate water supplies. It's not unusual now when the temperature rises a bit to see free water being supplied on train journeys, for example. France has also been hit, along with other European countries, it has to be said, by horrific fires. And now the country has improved the protection of its wildlife, if you like, over the last few years. And remember that France is the country, the home of the Paris Climate Change Accords of 2015. So it sees itself as at the forefront of all these climate-related issues. So it doesn't have all the answers, of course, but it shows it's trying, and it's trying to guide, if you like, other countries to take similar precautions.
Okay, let's move to a story in the Times, which talks about a French homicide law that will be directly applicable to people who cause death by drunk or drugged driving.
Yes, this is a very important story, actually, about a proposed new offence called road homicide, that is, road murder, that will be created in France to prosecute drunk or indeed drug drivers who cause horrific death on road accidents. And at the moment, such drivers are often let off with a very light sentence. And despite the carnage that they cause, and in my view, I quite agree that this can't go on. President Macron's government said it was responding to demands from safety organizations for people responsible for the worst fatal accidents to be tried for more serious crime than the previous involuntary homicide or manslaughter. Families of the victims are particularly shocked that these accidents should be deemed involuntary, especially when alcohol and drugs are involved.
The issue here, though, is that those who are campaigners of people who've died as a result of drunk or drugged drivers saying, OK, you're changing this law in name only because the penalties are exactly the same. Is that correct?
Precisely. I mean, there's a snag with the plan that as it stands, and that, oddly, there is no plan to push the sentences for the new crime up. And this is very strange indeed. At the moment, involuntary killing carries a prison sentence of up to 5 years. In some instances, when there are more than one aggravating circumstances involved, it can go up to 10 years. But Conservative members of Parliament who campaign to reduce the high rate of road accidents, said that the maximum prison sentence for causing death under the influence should be raised to 15 years, with a minimum term of 7 years to be served. And it has to be said that France at the moment holds a very dire record compared to other EU countries when it comes to road accidents.
It's interesting. When decisions like this are made, one wonders how political they are, who they are actually appealing to.
Well, you only have to look at the grim figures since the early 70s, the period which was deemed critical. I mean, road deaths peaked at 18,000 per year. Now, in those days, courts deemed that the consumption of alcohol was a mitigating factor because it had diminished the driver's awareness of the risk. But the figures for last year still stand at a staggering 3,260 deaths per year. And that's a level that remains stable over the past decade.
And briefly, let's have a look at the times. Next time you go for a visit to Milan and you climb the roof of the Duomo, which is one of the most wonderful things you can ever do, you don't do it with your normal eyes. You put on virtual reality goggles. My heart kind of sank a bit, Nabila, when I saw this story. But I thought, is this going to make my trip wonderful?
Well, this is essentially a story that is trying to bring old institutions into the modern world. So the Duomo in Milan, which is a beautiful ancient place of worship, which took 600 years to build, and it's Italy's largest cathedral. It's effectively on a mission to draw even larger crowds by using augmented and virtual reality eyewear, in other words, smart glasses, to enhance the experience. And from later this month, if visitors can wear smart glasses to see projected images and to hear audio recordings as they explore the cathedral. So you can wander around in different areas and you will see the Roman chapel built in 397 AD. That's how old it is. Now, the device means that the glasses are hooked up to a server that tracks the user's position. So effectively, they will respond to eye movement to project images and on screen and play sounds. And it means that, for example, you can look at the windows and you will be hearing some storytelling. So.
You almost need to go twice, don't you? So you go with your real eyes the first time around and then you go with your augmented eyes the second time around. I was at an exhibition in London last week. It's a Herzog and de Morin architecture exhibition. And I went around the exhibition and then you spend your whole time with your phone trying to get an augmented reality vision of the buildings in front of you. And I hate to say it, the exhibition itself was brilliant, but the fact is that most of my abiding memory of it was trying to get the app to work and trying to get the augmented reality thing to start off. And I sometimes wonder where this balance has to be struck between getting that fabulous virtual reality or augmented reality window or temple or chapel or whatever, but at the same time just looking at something.
Yes, indeed, and one shouldn't forget that churches are primarily, very serious places. They are places of worship. They are, by definition, quite stern, if you like. And I think the idea is to turn perhaps this novelty will be a good way of raising interest and getting potential new worshippers, maybe from the younger crowd. For example, France, after the fire in Notre Dame in 2019, a lot of people started to think about introducing gimmicks in Notre Dame to bring in more people, such as a glass roof, to try to get younger crowds in. And but it has been met by the fury of traditionalists who think that tradition should not be played with, and that's really the debate in France, really, about whether or not to introduce such gimmicks in Notre Dame.
I'll see you in Milan's Duomo, bumping into pillars with my headset on. Nabila Ramdani, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio.